Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
The Thunder and Fire magical domain, which Joseph cast instantaneously with the King of Flames staff, managed to entrap the four ghost warriors with mad streaks of lightning and balls of fire. These spells fell on the body of the ghost warriors, and it was obvious that the ghost warriors would not be able to sustain it for long despite having defense stronger than dragons. As for the three other patriarchs, one of them was the legendary mage, who cast the Thunderstorm Disaster magical domain, and the other two were sword sages of the legendary level, who radiated golden combat energy. The elder from the Dida family was slightly different. Although he walked like Elvis and had cast the same ice storm as him, he summoned a legendary level abyssal demon. Yet, that abyssal demon was not as powerful as the demon lord. It was the most common ice demon from the 21st level of the abyss. Although it was only a legendary level ice demon, it was only at the peak of level 20. It was said that the Ashen Warlock had once owed the Dida family a favor. Hence, he gave them the spell to summon one of the abyssal demons. However, this summoning spell had a problem. The summoner had to defeat the abyssal demon he summoned in order to be recognized as the master. That was probably what happened to the ice demon that was summoned by the elder from the Dida family. As compared to the Mithril Alliance, the performance of the Caesar family was less impressive. Apart from Patriarch Claus, who was at the peak of level 23, the other legendary powerhouses, there were only around level 21 and level 22. However, Lin Li did not believe that Caesar family would dare to collaborate with the Mithril Alliance with such a low capability. He presumed that the Caesar family had been holding back their trump cards as well. Master Flick, since our men are in the state of alert now, let's end this battle quickly, shall we? Suggested Hoffman smilingly after he saw Lin Li looking away from the battlefield. When Lin Li was observing the ability of his competitors, Hoffman was not idle either. Frankly speaking, although he was aware that they were hiding their potential, he could not help but be stunned by their ability. However, after noticing Lin Li's calm expression, Hoffman became composed immediately. Although he did not know how many trump cards Lin Li had, he was certain that Lin Li was not someone who would settle for less. As his ally, he was convinced that he wouldn't be at a disadvantage as long as he followed in the footsteps of the Tower of Dusk. Sure, replied Lin Li as he returned a smile. He took his Helios scepter and flew to the edge of the battlefield. At the same time, he cast the magical domain of frost, light, and darkness that was made up of the laws of ice as its foundation. These ghost warriors did not warrant Lin Li to use his full power. Hence, he did not cast his light and darkness domain that was already embedded with sanctuary level energy. Instead, he used the magical domain of frost, light, and darkness, something that everyone in the breezy plains knew about. Immediately, the region under the magical domain turned white. The snow that accumulated formed many powerful frost magical beasts. There were even angels of light and dark that flapped their wings in the air, and they swooped towards those ghost warriors. At the same time, the other legendary powerhouses from the Tower of Dusk increased the intensity of their attacks. Ufalusi, Norfaler, Basel, and Connorus displayed their formidable methods and forced their opponents to the edge. There was only one man who did not participate in the battle. He was the timid goblin, Angelano. Of course, this was not out of his cowardice, but due to Lin Li's arrangement. After all, his alchemy colossus was a Titan-level machine. It had the ability of powerhouses in the sanctuary realm. At the same time, that thing was really destructive equipment. Lin Li did not want to destroy the mausoleum right at the start of the exploration. As for the Glitter Gold Trade Union, Hoffman really lived up to his status as the owner of the Book of 10,000 Incantations. The vengeance staff in his hands continued to flash, and the never-ending glow of curse spell that emerged started to engulf the ghost warriors. The ghost warriors, who fell under the curse, glowed with an array of colors. All sorts of spells with the effect to suppress their energy restrained their abilities immediately. Lin Li glanced at the scene, and he could not help but feel sympathetic for those ghost warriors. How is this still a battle? This is just like the most straightforward torture. This explained why people who had ability that surpassed many would not want to be an enemy of Hoffman. It was not just because of the Glitter Gold Trade Union, but also the fear of that particular curse. Even if they would not lose their lives due to the curse, the fact that it had zero boundaries would definitely torture them into madness. However, Hoffman was not the most powerful man within the Glitter Gold Trade Union. He was just the most difficult to deal with. The most powerful person was legendary Mage Thomas, the man who'd built the Glitter Gold Trade Union single-handedly. After all, not long after Thomas entered the legendary realm, he participated in the war against the Retribution Knight Rodhart and the team of Death Knights. There were many legendary powerhouses who perished in that catastrophe. His ability to survive it was not merely based on luck. The magical domain created by Thomas was an element domain that was made up of the elemental laws of earth, fire, water, and wind. These 4 laws were considered the foundation of everything related to magic. This element domain had the potential to raise the impact of any spells used within the region to a terrifying level. Thomas was standing in his element domain. Despite only casting the most common and low-level fireballs and icicles, they had great impact within the element domain. The domain allowed men who were in level 15 and level 16 to cast legendary level spells. Although the ghost warriors had great immunity to magic, it was not a flawless resistance. If the spell were to exceed their tolerance level, all they needed to fall was time. Lin Li had seen the same element domain from Rosen from the Supreme Council. He could tell that a common problem Thomas and Rosen had was their broad goals. Although the most common ticket to the sanctuary realm was the comprehension of the basic laws of the world, it seemed like it would be almost impossible for one to master the 4 great laws. The ghost warriors were definitely powerful and in great strength. Had the 2 adventure teams not partnered up at the beginning, they would have had to end their exploration and risk perishing here. However, although the 2 teams were not on friendly terms, they had the same goal, to continue their exploration of Prince Bahir's mausoleum. No one would do anything to steer away from this goal at such a timing. After the higher-ups entered, they brought the battle to an end very quickly. The ghost warriors, who had been standing guard in this mausoleum for God knew how many years, could only dissipate after letting out some indignant cries. When everything calmed down, Lin Li raised his Helios scepter and sent a gigantic solar sphere to the ceiling of the hall. Then, the sphere divided into fragments that flew off to every part of the hall. They lit the place as bright as in daytime. While this was only an illumination spell, it was the first time that Hoffman and Joseph witnessed such a utilization of the spell. After lighting up the entire hall, the men noticed doors lined up on both sides of the hall, some of which were wide open and had to be where the ghost warriors had come from. They did not know what was behind the tightly closed doors. While everyone was still questioning Lin Li's unusual actions, they could not help but be excited due to the possibility that there would be research treasures behind the closed doors. However, it was as if their enthusiasm were flushed with cold water with the opening of each door. Their passion decreased to the freezing point after they saw spacious rooms behind those doors. They were without treasures, housing just the bones of magical beasts. There were many kinds of bones that belonged to the magical beasts of Anral, including some that none of the men could recognize. Does this mausoleum belong to Bahir or magical beasts? Why did he have to plant these here? Hoffman muttered with furrowed brows. Could it be that he wanted to use them to guard the mausoleum, but did not expect them to die a long time ago? Joseph asked curiously. Although he had acquired Bahir's diary, they could not give a convincing reason when faced with such a situation. Can't you see that these bones are different? Lin Li said as he knocked on the gigantic skull in front of him. He continued, this seems to belong to a chimera, but I've never heard that they can have such a huge head. Lin Li's reminder encouraged Hoffman to scrutinize the skeletons around him again. He pointed to a set of skeletons and hesitantly said, this seems to belong to a Leviathan gorilla, but why does it have wing bones? After looking through the rooms on both sides of the hall, all the men noticed something in common. They realized that each of these skeletons seemed to have gone through mutation. This included skeletons with wings and horns nobody would expect them to have. Even pythons were seen to have grown 4 limbs. The scene was like an erratic animal exhibit. There were many noble high elves who loved to collect mutated magical beasts. As he's a prince of the high elves, it is not unusual for Bahir to possess them, either. I think we can continue with our exploration now, urged Joseph impatiently. Joseph's explanation was not without basis, either. There were many historical records that noted that the high elves enjoyed keeping mutated magical beasts. There was no helping it. If not for their incredibly long lifespan, the high elves would have found better things to do. Lin Li was only filled with doubts. He did not have an answer to this. Not seeing the value of those skeletons, he turned to Hoffman. Let's continue with the exploration. However, we have to be very vigilant. I don't think this mausoleum is as simple as it seems, warned Lin Li. Isn't it obvious that Prince Bahir's mausoleum is not to be trifled with? Sneered Charles sarcastically. But he became silent the moment he felt Claw's fiery glare. Unlike the indifference shown by the others, Lin Li's words had extreme gravity for Hoffman, not to mention that the skeletons were in eccentric forms. Even if Lin Li were to present his guesses that had zero basis, Hoffman would choose to believe Lin Li without a reason. After all, Lin Li was a man who had ventured into a sky castle in Osric's mausoleum. His experience was not what anyone could match up with. Due to the earlier confrontation with the ghost warriors, the rest of the magic gears and traps had all been automatically shut down. This helped to speed up the mission greatly. Very soon, the team reached the passageway that would lead them to the next level. However, after they entered the passageway, they needed Angelano again. The passageway was so spacious that it would even fit a worm, yet it was still packed with gears and traps. However, as Lin Li watched Angelano help to deactivate the traps and gears, a frown gradually appeared on his face. "Flick, have you noticed something fishy?" asked Connors. Although he was not as competent in the deactivation of magic gears and traps as compared to Angelano, he was an ancient deity in charge of conspiracy and deception. After all, he would have an eye for such situations. "Did you notice anything amiss?" Lin Li asked Connors as he seemed to be engaged in deep thoughts. "Most of those magic gears and traps seem to only have been added to the mausoleum after it had been built," spoke Connors in a low voice. "In the blueprints for mausoleums, there would usually be segments dedicated to all sorts of magic gears and traps, which would only be added to their planned spaces after the completion of the main structure. That helped the gears and traps integrate seamlessly with the mausoleum and prevent intruders from discovering and deactivating them." However, Lin Li could tell that the magic gears and traps, which Angelano helped deactivate, were all constructed rather unnaturally. It was as if they were never part of the plan of the construction at all. It would not be that much of a great deal if this was built in the present era, but this was Prince Berhir's mausoleum. Would the High Elves commit such a mistake in the building of their prince's mausoleum? Finally, the Pathfinder team got to the end of the passageway. They slowly opened the tight door and trod past it. The third level of the mausoleum was as large as the previous level, but not as spacious as before. Instead, there were all sorts of unusual installations around the hall. "See, could this be the incubation room?" Hoffman and the others gasped in awe after getting closer. "Seems like it," Lin Li replied, and nodded his head. It was no wonder Hoffman and the rest were so surprised. Although all of them were the leaders of the top forces in the Breezy Plains, especially the Glitter Gold Trade Union, that was recognized to be extravagant, the existence of incubation rooms was only hearsay. One would first require great financial ability and resources to build a real incubation room. This was not what any organization could afford, not to mention that it would still require talents among many other things necessary to build and maintain that. Actually, to the common men, the incubation room did not have much use. The incubation room would not be directly of help in raising their power. Hence, none of the forces were willing to put in so much effort into building a real incubation room. However, not everyone felt the same way. For the Tower of Dusk, Lin Li had an incubation room. Although the scale was not as large as this, it was fully furnished and functional. Hence, Lin Li had to be the most well-versed in the knowledge on incubation rooms. The incubation room was not a place that could help to generate much wealth. Since the costs would usually outweigh the benefits, it was actually a money-losing business. The real advantage of the incubation room was that it was a place for mages to breed different types of living beings for research purposes. Of course, if it was for normal research, it wouldn't be that hard to construct a common incubation room. However, how would mages settle for normal research? How would a dissection of a rabbit or a rat be a subject of research? If a real top mage were to be serious about conducting any research, they would all sound terrifying. One would be able to grow any creature in an incubation room. This would include plants, magical beasts, demons, and dragons. Nobody would be able to imagine the craze mages had. Their thirst for knowledge and pursuit of every essence of the world, as well as their desire to dissect divines, made their second name atheists. As for whether their research would reap any rewards, it would be unknown to the mages too. It had been said that the god of mages Garesko was once disheartened by the vanishing of the titans and dragons, as he wasn't able to catch any one of them for his research. According to the Supreme Council's public denial, Garesko only wanted to find out if the titans and dragons were able to populate, regardless of whether it was for pure sadism or for the desire to explore into the essence of life. The research of mages would usually take not only 1 or 2 days, but decades and centuries. Hence, a real incubation room had to relate to the laws of time. A man-made time domain was a key factor in the building of the foundation of an incubation room. Through the time domain, mages would be able to control the time within the incubation room and hasten the time needed for living beings that originally required decades and hundreds of years to mature. Of course, man-made time domain was only one challenging part of an incubation room. Apart from that, there were still many problems from every aspect. This included having a source of mana that was enough to support the rapid growth of the creatures and potions that could provide them with enough nutrients. Hence, a real incubation room would be really important in the assessment of powerful high elves, mages, even if it was in the Dark Ages. It was not unusual for Berhir to have an incubation room with his status among the high elves. What was weird was the reason why an incubation room would appear in a mausoleum. To say that the Prince Berhir's mausoleum would still want to do research after his death would be totally absurd. But, after seeing the items in the incubation room, no one ever pondered this question anymore. Everybody's breath was taken away, including the wealthy Hoffman, Joseph, and Claus, whose organizations had over 1,000 years of heritage. They had no experience in the building of an incubation room, and had not seen a real incubation room, but this did not mean that they had no knowledge of it. Although this incubation room seemed to have been abandoned a really long time ago, most of the facilities had lost their functionality, and many key parts had been lost or damaged. They could feel that the most important time domain within the incubation room was still functioning. Apart from the time domain, the other facilities within the incubation room were the most sophisticated technology in all sorts of domains. Even if they had lost their original use, if they could transport them back as artifacts, they would really gain huge fortune. Why did these people take on such a great risk in the exploration of this relic? Seeking the historical truth would merely be a superficial reason. The fundamental goal was still benefits. They wanted to tremendously enhance the ability of themselves and their organizations. And now, this advantage was placed right before their eyes. As long as they could bring some of these back, this trip wouldn't be wasted. No one could remain calm at this thought. Of course, there was an exception. Lin Li already had an incubation room in the Tower of Dusk. Although it was not a large-scale incubation room, the facilities within it were extremely complete. He naturally had no interest in the equipment in this deserted incubation room that had stopped functioning. Because of that, Lin Li could naturally put his attention on places that the others missed. Apart from the reason why the incubation room was constructed in a mausoleum, Lin Li had also noticed another unusual thing in the incubation room. It was the eerie air. Normally, ruins that had not been ventured into would have a pungent smell of decay. Yet Lin Li only felt fresh air when he stepped through the door of the incubation room. He could even smell a faint pleasant scent of flowers and grasses. This made the situation extremely dubious. Lin Li was extremely clear that they were a dozen meters underground in a mausoleum left deserted for over 1,000 years. He could even see the skeletons of a dozen high elves not far away. Although the high elves were born from the tree of eternity, they were made of flesh and bones just like humans and any other races with intelligence. Lin Li had not heard that the decaying bodies of the high elves would have a pleasant smell. Where did that smell of flowers and grasses come from? Lin Li really could not comprehend it. Just when Lin Li was deep in thought, Hoffman came to him. "Flick, what are you thinking about?" he asked while patting on his shoulders. "Oh, Master Hoffman, what is it?" Lin Li asked patronizingly. Hoffman's voice brought him back to the present. "Have you seen anything? Claus suggested that we split these treasures and bring them out of the mausoleum. What do you think about that?" Hoffman asked, not knowing what was on Lin Li's mind. He just thought that Lin Li had something that caught his eye. "Is that so? How should we split that?" Lin Li turned to ask the rest. "The Caesar family hopes to acquire the time domain ManhwaRecap. I know some of you may have similar thoughts as well, but I believe that you will be interested in my offerings," spoke Claus. As the first speaker, he mentioned the most valuable thing in the incubation room. Although he spoke with much confidence, his eyes continued to glance towards Lin Li subconsciously. When they were previously discussing the partnership, Lin Li was the one who demanded a one-time priority to be the first person to choose whatever he wanted. If Lin Li mentioned that he also wanted the time domain ManhwaRecap at this time, Claus would not have a reason to deny his request, unless he was willing to offend Lin Li. Claus' motive in wanting the time domain ManhwaRecap was not to build an incubation room when he returned. After all, the time domain was not the only thing they needed to build an incubation room. However, there was more than one function to the time domain. Its ability to control the passage of time could similarly be of great use in other aspects. It was just like how a mage would spend a day meditating by himself, but if he were to meditate in the time domain for a year, it might only take a day outside the domain. This meant that a day of meditation would help one to boost his accumulation of mana by a year. It would be especially helpful if one were to be below the legendary level, as they would not need to enhance their powers through enlightenment. A mage who wanted to proceed to level 16 from level 15 would require a year's time to accumulate his mana, but with the time domain, he would only need a day. Apart from mages, the time domain was beneficial to other occupations too. This would include warriors and assassins who needed to boost their combat energy and practice their skills. Lin Li naturally knew how to read Claus' expression, but he did not see the same value in the time domain. Lin Li's incubation room naturally had a time domain. As a guru of inscription, Lin Li would be able to form a time domain ManhwaRecap as long as he had the resources. Why else could the team have such a good sense of camaraderie? Furthermore, the time domain would not be a free lunch, for one had to pay other costs. The passage of time would entail aging. If one were to stay in the domain for 100 years, he might lose his life. While Lin Li could create high-level potions that would reduce the side effects for mages, it would not be the same for the Caesar family. At the same time, maintaining the operation of the time domain would also require support of a gigantic mana source. The power that humans could obtain from it did not appear out of thin air, either. Lin Li ended up using up more than 10 legendary magical crystals when he used the time domain to hone the cooperation and tacit understanding between the mages. If the Caesar family wanted to use the time domain to produce powerhouses in batches, they'd end up using up more than just 10 odd legendary magical crystals. Besides, there was another problem. Obtaining power through such a method might not necessarily be a good thing for mages. Due to the huge difference in the passage of time, the mages' abilities and strength would not be improved in the outside world once they left the time domain. If they wanted to continue improving their strength, they would have to enter the time domain again. That might be considered a form of dependence or addiction. Hence, when Lin Li used the time domain to hone the cooperation and tacit understanding between the mages, he strictly forbade any of them from meditating. Those who wanted to meditate would have to go to the outside world to do so. Anyway, in the Tower of Dusk, there was a control crystal of the Sky Castle that could allow them to increase the effects of meditation. Hence, no one dared to take the risk to try and meditate in the time domain. Of course, Lin Li did not show his indifference towards the time domain in front of Claus. He didn't want to give up any of the benefits he deserved. Even if he didn't want the time domain, he had to pretend to want it and then rip Claus off harshly. In order to obtain the Magetharay of the time domain, Claus went all out and did not hesitate no matter the cost. He directly offered generous conditions like mines, territories, and business channels. As long as Lin Li gave up the Magetharay, he would be willing to give him anything he wanted. As a result, the wealthy Hoffman also chose to accept Klaus' terms after carefully considering the gains and losses. They were only on the 3rd floor of the mausoleum, and there might be more valuable items at the bottom. Even if they stopped exploring there, they wouldn't have been there for nothing if they could receive Klaus' generous compensation. Lin Li had been thinking about the doubts he had just now, and thus was not in the mood to bargain with Klaus. Besides, the offer Klaus made was already attractive enough. Hence, he quickly nodded and agreed. Joseph and Klaus were close allies in the first place, so the former definitely couldn't deliberately make things hard for Klaus. After all, they would be continuing to explore further. It was definitely not wise to have fewer allies and multiple enemies. The four forces quickly negotiated and reached a consensus for everything, including the distribution of other important items in the incubation room, and the next step was undoubtedly a major demolition. That was also the usual approach for exploring ruins, especially for such a large team of expediters. Once they encountered a small profit, they would have to put it in their own pocket. Otherwise, who knew what would happen in the future? There might not be another chance to reap such benefits. Legend had it that there were expedition teams that wanted to save the benefits they encountered along the way in a ruin until they returned. Although they escaped, the ruin was completely buried underground by lava. Suffering a huge loss, the leader of the expedition team went berserk. Hence, there was a tacit rule for expeditions in ruins, and that was to pocket all treasures before anything else. However, just as everyone was preparing to move into the incubation room, Lin Li frowned and couldn't help but exclaim, "Wait a minute, what's the matter, Master Flick? Did you discover any problems?" Hoffman had been standing beside Lin Li because he didn't have to move the items. Hearing Lin Li's sudden call for a stop, he couldn't help but be surprised. After all, Lin Li had broken through the Sky Castle and Osric's mausoleum. Could it be that he had found some hidden danger? Joseph and Claus couldn't help but immediately stopped their men. Although their relationship with Lin Li was not very friendly, they also valued Lin Li's experience in exploring ruins. However, after hearing Hoffman's question, Lin Li shook his head and said, "No, although I don't know why, I feel that something is wrong here. We'd better retreat now." "President Flick, this joke is not funny at all. You agreed to the conditions I just put forward. Are you going back on your word now?" Klaus' face immediately grew sullen. He treated the Magetharay in the time domain as a treasure, and naturally felt that it was just as important to everyone else. Hence, he immediately wondered if Lin Li regretted giving it up. Joseph originally had a grudge with Lin Li. Seeing that Lin Li could not give a reasonable explanation, his face suddenly grew sullen. He said in a deep voice, "President Flick, if you can tell me the reason, we might be able to consider it. But you're making us stop without telling us why. What are you trying to do?" Lin Li thought. "Explain." "What for?" "I haven't figured it out yet." He just felt that something was amiss with the place. However, he couldn't figure it out, otherwise he would have made it clear long ago. Since Joseph and Claus ignored him, Lin Li didn't say anything to them. He glanced at Hoffman, who was next to him, and said, "Master Hoffman, what do you think?" "Well, this mausoleum is extraordinary. Just to be safe, I think we'd better quit and have a look first. Anyway, those things are here, and it doesn't make any difference to pick them up earlier or later." Hoffman resolutely agreed with Lin Li's suggestion. However, There was still some doubt in his eyes. It seemed that he hoped for Lin Li to reveal some more information. Although Hoffman supported Lin Li's suggestion, Joseph and Claus did not change their mind. Instead, they became more determined to stay. In the eyes of the two of them, the Glitter Gold Trade Union was clearly on the same side as the Tower of Dusk. Now that Hoffman had agreed to Lin Li's suggestion without asking for the reason, they were suspecting that there was some conspiracy between them. Do you really want to stay here? Lin Li asked Joseph and Claus again. If it wasn't for the fact that they had Brahir's diary, and the fact that the Tower of Dusk and Glitter Gold Trade Union could not explore the ruins alone, Lin Li wouldn't be bothered to care about their lives. However, Joseph and Claus were obviously certain that Lin Li and Hoffman were getting up to some scheming tricks. Their faces were full of disdain, and they said, "I'm sorry, we don't find this place dangerous at all. You're so timid, yet you're here to explore the ruins. I really don't know how you became the president. If you want to leave, you can go ahead. It is best to take your obedient babies back to your Tower of Dusk and hide," jibed Charles, who had been following Claus. He definitely would not miss this opportunity to mock his enemy. Although he seemed to be talking to himself, his voice was loud enough for almost everyone to hear him. Charles' taunt immediately angered everyone from the Tower of Dusk, especially the mages. The staff in their hands immediately lit up as if they were about to drown Joseph in a magic storm. The next moment, seeing the situation, the people of the Mithril Alliance and the Caesar family became nervous and got ready to fight. However, Lin Li didn't bother to waste time on Charles. He waved his hand to stop the mages. At the same time, he said, "Retreat, go back along the same route immediately." Although the people of the Tower of Dusk did not understand why the president gave such an order, they did not hesitate for a moment and quickly obeyed the order. Even Basil, who had just joined, didn't ask much. He simply turned around and took his student Davos and retreated to the second floor together with the team. They went back to the same path. Seeing that Lin Li had already given orders, Hoffman didn't say anything else. Since he had already given his support, he had to support Lin Li all the way. Hence, he also issued an order for everyone on his side to retreat. The team from the Glitter Gold Trade Union immediately followed suit and prepared to retreat with the members of the Tower of Dusk. However, at this moment, a mage who came from nowhere suddenly yelled, "Mana, my mana." Upon hearing that scream, all the mages discovered that something terrible was happening to them. The mana in their bodies suddenly began running out uncontrollably, and it was as if there was an invisible monster hidden in the surroundings that was sucking and draining them of their mana. The legendary mages present did not feel any obvious changes, but those below the legendary level all turned pale as their mana weakened. However, within a short period of time, all the mages of the four forces who were below the legendary level lost all their mana and became inferior to ordinary people. The entire incubation room was immediately engulfed in a horrific tension. The mages panicked because of the shocking changes that were happening in their bodies. Although the warriors and assassins did not feel any obvious changes, they could not help but grow flustered as well. "Don't space out, hurry, retreat and leave." Lin Li immediately sensed that the mana in his body was reducing rapidly. Although his huge accumulation of mana allowed him to stay unaffected for a while, what was going to happen to the mages under him if there were any changes? Even he might not be able to endure it for long. Hearing Lin Li's urging, everyone immediately sped up, including the people behind the Glitter Gold Trade Union. At this point, Joseph and Claus stopped asking Lin Li for the reason and simply yelled at their subordinates to urge them to leave the incubation room. However, at this moment, another change occurred in the incubation room, and countless green tentacles appeared out of nowhere. They were dense like wild grass and flew towards everyone quickly. Seeing this scene, Lin Li's heart suddenly tensed up, and a shadow flashed in his mind. Damn it, is this? The terrible guess in his mind made Lin Li uncontrollably overwhelmed with fear. If it were really that terrifying thing, he would suffer a major loss during the exploration this time. The owner of those green tentacles obviously didn't want to let the intruders off. They immediately reached the entrance before the team did, and used their tentacles to lock the door of the incubation room. The warriors and the team did not need any orders. They waved their weapons at the tentacles that closed the door. However, those tentacles were persistent, and they could not be cut off regardless of how hard the warriors tried. Instead, the two tentacles that sprang up instantly penetrated the breastplates of the two warriors in front of them before coming out of their backs. They were dripping with blood like swords. At this moment, who would dare to rush forward again? The group quickly backed away like tidal waves, and avoided the walls that were covered in tentacles. During this period, the mana depletion of the mages did not stop, and even the legendary mages began to find it hard to hang on. They became so weak that those who were weaker almost fell out of the legendary realm. Damn, what the hell is this? Hoffman, don't you guys have the blueprint of this mausoleum? Weren't these monsters mentioned in it? Joseph barked angrily in a moment of panic. How much information can there be on a blueprint? Don't you guys have Brahir's diary? Didn't you see that he had added some stuff here? Hoffman was equally angry, and he thought Flick told you guys to leave just now. But you acted like he was out to harm you guys. Do you regret it now? Of course they did. Even Lin Li regretted it dearly. Had he known earlier that such a thing would happen, he wouldn't have bothered talking to Joseph and the rest. He would have just led them out. In the incubation room, screams, groans, cursing, and all sorts of other sounds could be heard. All of a sudden, splashing of water made everyone quiet as they looked in the direction of the water. In the middle of the incubation room, the unassuming pool that was not very noticeable at first seemed to have suddenly begun boiling. While the water splashed, a huge octopus-like monster rose slowly from the water, revealing its hideous and terrifying appearance. It looked like it was covered with countless eyes, and countless tentacles kept emerging from the water. With the appearance of the monster, the sounds of muttering could be heard in the entire incubation room. It seemed to have come from the distant horizon and echoed in their brains, making them feel that the entire world was full of the sounds. The archmages who had their mana depleted all had deadpan expressions as if they had lost their souls. Seeing the monster appear and hearing the whispers, Lin Li's eyes turned gloomy, and he felt that his worries had come true. They were in deep trouble this time. Yes, Lin Li knew what kind of monster it was. Even though he couldn't believe that he would see it there, he had to accept it. It was a symbol of a terrifying existence, the Whispering God. Lin Li's knowledge of the Whispering God was not from any myths and legends or literature pieces in Anral, but from the Endless World, which was the in-game world with countless players. The so-called Whispering God was not an actual god, but the horror it brought to every player in the Endless World was far greater than any other real god could bring. The power of the gods might be stronger, but they had never personally descended into the world, and the Whispering Gods had brought major disasters to the Endless World. The destruction of the City of Stars and many other cruel wars and calamities were all caused by the Whispering Gods. Even though the disasters caused by the Whispering Gods only happened in the in-game world, Lin Li still had a clear memory of it. At that time, he received a notification from the system which called on high-level players to go to the City of Stars to participate in the defense mission, which offered extremely generous rewards as soon as he logged on. It felt like a gift of benefits. However, when he arrived outside the City of Stars, he realized that it was a damned scam by the system because it was simply an impossible task. In the sky of the City of Stars, that was known as the largest city in the Endless World, there was a Whispering God, massive in size and waving its countless tentacles, while filling the entire city with endless whispers. All the mage players would instantly lose their mana as long as they had not entered the legendary realm. They would become worse than a level 1 novice, and no amount of potions would help. Legendary mages would not last long, either. They were still flying in the air and casting spells at the start, but they fell like raindrops soon enough, cackling in the air. Only the warriors, assassins, and hunters could retain their combat power. However, they could not cause the slightest harm to the Whispering God. The high-level leaders of various profession unions in the City of Stars, like the Guild of Magic, Guild of Warriors, and Guild of Assassins, who were also the NPCs who were originally responsible for imparting skills, all rose into the sky one by one. They exhibited their powers unreservedly and exerted their unknown strength to the fullest. To be honest, even a person who had lived in the City of Stars for a long time would never imagine there to be so many legendary powerhouses in the city. However, although the strength of those NPC legendary powerhouses was incredible, they still couldn't do anything to the Whispering God. According to the official statement, the first person to fall had reached the pinnacle of the legendary realm, and was only a step away from the sanctuary realm. Next, all 10 senior executives of the Guild of Magic from chief judges to mage instructor failed to escape from the tentacles of the Whispering God. The president of the Guild of Warriors, Sword Sage Kaspro, fell next, and the 13 legendary level Sword Sages, who were senior executives of the guild, all fell too. As the president of the Guild of Assassins, Edo, fell, the 12 master-level assassins of the guild followed. Only Daniel, the president of the Guild of Hunters, managed to lose just an arm in his Hunter King bow after summoning his pet Thunderhawk Queen, which blocked a fatal blow for him. He then escaped from the City of Stars in time. However, none of the other senior members of the Guild of Hunters were as lucky as him. They all died together with their pets. Seeing those powerful NPCs growing weak and helpless in the face of the Whispering God like novice players, all the other players present were on the verge of breaking down and collapsing. Originally, they were full of confidence and wanted to get the generous reward for the mission, but at that moment, they dropped their weapons and fled for their lives. However, in the face of the players, who had lost their intentions to resist, the Whispering God did not show any mercy. Instead, it slowly moved over the City of Stars, like a hot air balloon, while its countless tentacles constantly fell down, stabbing the bodies of the players and NPCs one after another like harpoons of fishermen. In that disaster, the Whispering God unscrupulously slaughtered hundreds of thousands of players, as well as countless NPCs who had been living in the City of Stars. Even the Castellan of the City of Stars was not spared, and the City of Stars was almost destroyed and completely erased from Endless World in one day. Although Lin Li was still some distance away from the City of Stars then, he was hiding in the grass and did not dare to move. Seeing the Whispering God slaughter and destroy the City of Stars, he could only secretly thank himself for procrastinating and missing out on the benefits. Afterward, the official website of Endless World was almost overwhelmed by players, who cursed their hearts out and demanded a reasonable explanation. The Endless World officials finally gave some information and explanations about the Whispering God, claiming that it was not a creature that was part of the background setting at the beginning of the game design, but was automatically generated by some algorithms in the game. In other words, it was a game loophole that was beyond their control. According to the official statement, the Whispering God was not a creature that could reproduce naturally. Instead, it was a monster that transcended the laws of nature and had been condensed from the countless souls of the dead of those that died during the war between the City of Stars and the City of Moon. Of course, the debris of the stars and the endless labyrinth that Lin Li designed had all appeared in the world of Anral. Hence, there was nothing too strange about the Whispering God appearing too. However, Lin Li still clearly remembered that the official announcement in the Endless World mentioned that only the souls of the dead that had been around for thousands of years or tens of thousands of years could condense into the Whispering God. So why did such a monster appear in Prince Bahir's mausoleum? However, time did not allow Lin Li to think about the answer to that question. No matter what, he was sure that the monster in front of him was the Whispering God, and he now had to think of a way to escape. In the game, he could die and respawn, but they were not in a game now. If he were to die, everything would be over. At this time, the Whispering God was producing endless whispers, while launching ferocious attacks on the expedition. The countless tentacles looked soft and weak, but at the moment of attack, they became sharper than any other weapon. The warriors in the team were all wearing top standard armor, yet it seemed like fragile paper in front of the Whispering God's tentacles. All warriors must protect mages, seeing that the mages under them had all become lambs that were waiting to be slaughtered, and the warriors' attacks were unable to cause effective damage to the Whispering God. Joseph and Claus quickly ordered the warriors to give up and guard the mages nearby to help them resist the tentacles. At this moment, the situation was a little embarrassing for the Tower of Dusk. Their team was composed of archmages, and under ordinary circumstances, their combat power would definitely be the strongest of the four teams. However, in the face of the Whispering God, all the mages below the legendary realm lost their combat power immediately. Other teams had warriors to guard them, but the Tower of Dusk did not have any warriors. Had Joseph and Claus not been dealing with the Whispering God, they would have been thrilled to see the state that the Tower of Dusk was in. Hoffman also saw the trouble that the Tower of Dusk was facing. However, the Glitter Gold Trade Union was having a hard time too, and did not have time to even take care of the mages of the Tower of Dusk. However, despite that, Hoffman asked Lin Li, "President Flick, let your people enter our formation. If you go on like this, if that were to go on, the mages might not be able to endure until they found a solution, and would end up being killed by the Whispering God." Lin Li knew about that. Of course, he felt somewhat regretful for not bringing the Holy Death Knights. As for now, Lin Li was very clear that even if he joined the Glitter Gold Trade Union, the Glitter Gold Trade Union's warriors would not be enough to protect everyone. On the contrary, it would cause the Glitter Gold Trade Union to have many loopholes, and both parties would be at the losing end. Hence, he resolutely rejected Hoffman's suggestion, and instead handed the duty of protection over to Connorus and Norfaler. At the same time, he summoned the legendary demon Gordon, whom he had subdued in the Sky Castle. The demon Gordon was initially not that outstanding when he was under Lin Li, but in a situation like this, it played a considerable role. First of all, its body, which was made of various magical metals, gave it a strong defensive power that was unmatched by any armor, and the sharp blades its arms formed could also deal certain damage to the tentacles of the Whispering God. Though not great, it could also prevent the Whispering God's attacks to a certain extent. The goblin Angelano, who had been shivering out of fear of the Whispering God, also released 20 alchemy puppets at this moment, and joined the team's defense. The alchemy puppets were not Iron Shadow assassins, but warrior-type alchemy puppets that were made of strong magical metals, which were specially used for overcoming melee traps. With 3 legendary powerhouses and 20 alchemy puppets, they could barely protect the mages who had lost their combat power. However, Lin Li knew very well in his heart that those were only a temporary solution. If a way to deal with the Whispering God could not be found in time, the mages and he himself would be doomed. Due to the fact that they had to take care of the mages, who had lost their combat power, there were not many people who could really fight the Whispering God. After all, an archmage was a precious asset to any force. However, the Whispering God that they were facing at this moment was already at the pinnacle of the legendary level. Unless someone could suppress it, no magic or offensive spell could deal damage to it. The legendary level Sword Sage's invincible fighting power could only give it a huge cut, but terrifying magic spells would disappear even before touching its body. The only thing to be thankful for might be the direct attacking power of the Whispering God, which was relatively lacking, since it couldn't release real magic spells. In addition to constantly devouring everyone's mana, the Whispering God could only rely on its tentacles to attack. The power that it could exert was below level 22, but that was terrifying enough. If there were only tens of tentacles, it would be fine, but the problem was that the entire room was full of its tentacles, making it impossible to count how many there were. Joseph continued to wave the King of Flames staff in his hand. The magic spell that he was casting now was probably enough to destroy a city, but after seeing that the magic light dissipated, and the monster was unharmed, he was overwhelmed with fear that could not be suppressed. What made him feel disappointed was the fact that the massive mana in his body was rapidly diminishing over time, as if dozens of legendary magic spells were being cast every second. The Whispering God's rate of mana depletion did not stop, and even sped up. Soon, the level 22 legendary mages who were fighting had no choice but to retreat. Although they did not fall out of the legendary realm, they could not go on. What made it worse was the fact that although they had all first arranged to protect the mages, the screams behind them were almost uninterrupted from the beginning of the battle. Among them were the voices of mages and warriors. Although there was only one Whispering God, the countless tentacles were like countless enemies, and the pervasive attacks were simply impossible to guard against. In this case, it was no longer time to hide his trump cards. Staying alive was the most important. Joseph had no doubt that if the situation went on, he would not be able to escape his fate of being buried for Prince Berhir. At the thought of this, Joseph once again released a massive flame dragon before quickly retreating a certain distance, and then he began to chant a spell. As he did, a huge six-pointed star array appeared in the open space not far in front of him. The light of the array became brighter and brighter. After reaching its extreme, it suddenly converged and turned dim. However, the light dissipated and left a huge body behind with two horns on its head. It was a black abyssal demon dragon. The abyssal demon dragon's summoning. All of a sudden, everyone seemed a little surprised, especially the Dida family of the Mithril Alliance. They couldn't believe their eyes. The spell that summoned the abyssal demon had always been an unspoken secret of the Dida family ever since the Ashen Warlock gave it to them. No one had known that Joseph had mastered that spell. Moreover, the former patriarch of the Dida family, Charles' father, was also killed because he summoned the abyssal demon dragon. Although the abyssal demon dragon was only at level 23, it was powerful in all aspects, and it would not be a problem for it to kill level 24 powerhouses. How did Joseph manage to successfully summon an adult abyssal demon dragon? However, it wasn't time to settle these problems now. Even though the Dida family was unhappy, they didn't dare to express any displeasure. After all, they still hoped that the abyssal demon dragon that Joseph had summoned would turn the tides for them. When almost everyone put their hopes on the abyssal demon dragon, Lin Li couldn't help but sigh. Joseph had evidently lost his composure. This abyssal demon dragon was particularly powerful. Even if Lin Li were to fight against it, he probably wouldn't stand a chance given his current abilities. However, they were facing the Whispering God now. In this incubation room, that was already not very spacious, wasn't this gigantic abyssal demon dragon a live target for the Whispering God's countless tentacles? Precisely because of this, Lin Li didn't summon his humorous Crimson Dragon. Facing the Whispering God, the abyssal demon dragon didn't back down. It let out a deafening roar before dashing towards the Whispering God in the pool. Countless tentacles shot out from the pool, swarming towards the abyssal demon dragon. Nobody knew exactly how many tentacles the Whispering God had. The walls and roof of the incubation room had been completely covered by its tentacles, and there were still so many hidden underwater. Seeing the approaching tentacles, the abyssal demon dragon let out a black dragon breath. Without slowing down, it continued flying towards the Whispering God's body. Nobody in this world, including the abyssal demon dragon, knew about the origins of the Whispering God. Thus, the abyssal demon dragon thought that its black dragon breath was enough to turn those disgusting tentacles into ashes. However, although the tentacles shrank when they came in contact with the black dragon breath, they reverted to their original state almost instantaneously. They zoomed past the black dragon breath as if it didn't exist, and shot towards the incoming abyssal demon dragon. It was too late for the charging abyssal demon dragon to avoid the tentacles now. It could only wave its sharp claws at the tangling tentacles. The fate of the abyssal demon dragon was already determined when it was summoned. In a disadvantageous location, fighting a disadvantageous battle against a monster that wasn't meant to exist in this world. The abyssal demon dragon was trapped in a massive cocoon of tentacles. In just a matter of seconds, what could be observed was the oozing dragon blood from that cocoon, and the dying howls of the abyssal demon dragon. When the tentacles released a gigantic skeleton onto the ground, Evrion's heart sank to the lowest point. Joseph almost wanted to vomit blood upon witnessing this sight. He had originally wanted to use this trump card to deal with the Tower of Dusk. However, it was turned into a skeleton in such a short time, without even helping with the situation. He had summoned this abyssal demon dragon at the expense of never being able to improve his power. Who would have thought that this was the outcome? Joseph yelled, "What are you holding back for? If you still don't act now, this will be our tomb." He believed that the others were all holding back their trump cards. Since he had suffered such great loss, there was no way the others could go scot-free. Although Joseph said this because he felt it was unfair for him to be the only one sacrificing, what he had said made sense. After all, the use of the trump cards was to help turn the tides. If they were to die without using their trump cards, it would be too absurd. Just then, a sudden change in their situation dispelled the last bit of hesitation in their minds. Under the whispers of the whispering god, those mages who had exhausted their magic suddenly walked out of the protective circle expressionlessly, totally oblivious to their companions' calls. Before the Mithril Alliance and Caesar family could react, a few mages had already walked out, and their bodies were pierced by the tentacles. The same thing was happening to the Tower of Dusk's mages as well, but Connorus and those in charge of protection didn't attempt to call them, but rather directly dragged them back to the protective circle. However, this method couldn't last. As time went by, the Whispering God would control more and more people. By then, just Connorus and his companions wouldn't be able to protect all these people. This was another ability of the Whispering God, controlling the opponent's mind with its whispers such that all surrounding creatures had to obey its orders. Only those mages who had lost their magic and become ordinary people were controlled by the Whispering God now. With time, even the warriors couldn't escape the fate of losing their consciousness to this monster. That would be a truly devastating situation. Claus from the Caesar family hesitated no longer, not mentioning whether his trump card could turn the tides or not. It would be good enough if it could help them even a little. He took out a silver box adorned with intricate mageths and arrays. As he injected mana into it, the mageths lit up. Suddenly, a black hole appeared at the center of an array at the top of the silver box. A ball of black smoke oozed out of the hole, sending out buzzing sounds that gave everyone goosebumps. Even Lin Li was quite surprised that Claus had released a swarm of bugs from his silver box. Although these bugs weren't eye-catching, Lin Li quickly recognized them as form-mimicking magical bugs that lived on level 31 of the Endless Abyss. The most distinct trait of these bugs was their ability to congregate into the form of any magical beast and obtain the beast's abilities. To put it simply, when these bugs congregated to form a wyrm, they could spit dragon breath just like a real wyrm, cast dragon language magic, and even release the menace of the dragon that was unique to wyrms. What was truly terrifying was that the magical beasts formed by these bugs were almost indestructible since they could reform back once they were dispersed. The only way to destroy them was to kill every individual bug. However, these individual bugs also possessed the immense vitality and vigor typical of insects. Moreover, their bodies had very high magic immunity comparable to the magical metals. So the canary family's bug hive is with you. No wonder back at the... Joseph didn't continue his sentence. He knew that this wasn't time for him to talk about the past now. He could settle everything after they survived this. The canary family was one of the 13 families that were in the Mithril Alliance since the start. It was said that the canary family was exterminated during the battle between the Mithril Alliance and the Blood Moon clan. Of course, that was what the Mithril Alliance had announced. Nobody knew what the actual situation had been like. The form-mimicking bugs that Claus had released continuously shifted into different forms like a slab of dough, being molded by an invisible hand. Within moments, the bugs congregated into a human-shaped form without a face. This alarmed those people who knew about the bugs' background. Before these bugs could form any magical beast, it had to engulf that beast first. Now that they had formed a human shape, then obviously, the person that these bugs formed got hold of the sword adorned with a sapphire from Claus. As if she had known that sword, she gently caressed the sword's spine before dashing towards the Whispering God like a flash of lightning. Upon seeing the moves of the person formed by the bugs, Thomas from the Glitter Gold Trade Union couldn't help but yell, "It's Freya Canary." Freya Canary was said to be a commonly acknowledged female genius in the breezy plains back then, and the Canary family saw her as the hope of reviving the family. She became the first female sword sage in Anril at the age of 20. At 30, her ability was already at the peak of legendary realm. Because of Freya, the Canary family used to hold much power in the Mithril Alliance, with its power just below the Caesar family that had founded the Mithril Alliance. Unfortunately, Freya unexpectedly lost to Mogadi, who was only level 23 in the battle between the Mithril Alliance and the Blood Moon clan. After that, the Canary family was exterminated, and the badly injured Freya was nowhere to be found. This was the end of her legend. Some said that she had lost all hope and lived in seclusion, and others said that she was caught by the Blood Moon clan. However, nobody would have thought that she would reappear before everyone in such a state. Lin Li had to acknowledge that the Mithril Alliance and Caesar family, which were ancient families that had existed for more than 1,000 years, were indeed not so simple. However, they were dealing with an even more terrifying whispering god now. This human formed by the bugs might not be as ill-fated as the abyssal demon dragon, but its use was definitely very limited. It might even make matters worse. The appearance of the form-mimicking bugs had only added one more legendary level fighter to the exploration team, although it had the characteristic of being undying. The whispers of the Whispering God were more worrisome for the team. If their opponent wasn't the Whispering God, these form-mimicking bugs could even kill the abyssal demon dragon that Joseph had summoned. However, what Lin Li was worried about was quickly turned into reality. After a few exchanges with the Whispering God, the human that the bugs had formed slowed down in her attacks. Before Claus discovered any abnormalities, his trump card turned back and charged towards the exploration team. The magical bugs that had turned against them took the exploration team by surprise. One of the legendary mages from the Caesar family almost lost his life under the sword of the bugs. This sudden turning back was totally unexpected to Claus. He had thought that even if the form-mimicking magical bugs couldn't be of much help, they could at least increase their fighting force. However, it turned out that he had helped their enemy increase its strength. Claus immediately started injecting mana into the silver box called the Hive, hoping to regain control over the bugs. However, his mana was nothing compared to the Whispering God's controlling abilities. To make matters worse, as Claus continuously injected mana, the maggots on the Hive couldn't withstand such strong pressure anymore. With blinding explosions of light, the maggots completely lost their function. Claus had outsmarted himself. His trump card had not only been unable to turn the tides, but instead drove the team deeper into the abyss of desperation. Joseph was rather jealous of Claus' Hive at first, but now he would have scolded him if not for the fact that they were in alliance. Fortunately, a figure shining with golden light suddenly joined the battle, and shielded those scampering legendary mages from the magical bug's attack. Just then, the team noticed that a golden warrior statue had appeared in the hands of Thomas of the Glitter Gold Trade Union, the war god's shadow. Seeing the golden statue in Thomas' hands, Joseph and Claus' breathing sped up a little. They even momentarily forgot what kind of dire situation they were in now. Out of all the legends about the High Elves' magical equipment from the Dark Age, the War God's Shadow was certainly the first on the list. Legends had it that the War God's Shadow was crafted by the High Elves with a captured Titan spirit, and the blood of numerous ancient wyrms and prehistoric magical beasts. As an existence that was similar to the spirit entities, it was sealed in a tiny golden statue. Since it was called the War God's Shadow, it naturally possessed power similar to a war god's. It was rumored that the strongest war god's shadow possessed sanctuary-level strength. Lin Li didn't doubt the war god's shadow's power at all. Back in the Ga mountain range, the Titan spirit that protected its skeleton had power no worse than a sanctuary powerhouse. However, this war god's shadow was fighting intensely with the human formed by the magical bugs. Evidently, it was rather far from sanctuary level. If it was really at the sanctuary level, it might be able to help everyone past this obstacle. Unfortunately, it wasn't. As for whether it was due to the decrease in power due to time or any other reasons, Lin Li didn't have time to ask Hoffman now. After the war god's shadow had appeared, it held the magical bugs back from attacking the exploration team, restoring the status quo. However, time was irreversible. The number of people who had been controlled by the Whispering God continued to increase, and those in charge of protecting the mages got even busier. Some of the less powerful warriors even started being enticed by the Whispering God's whispers. How could they survive this? Lin Li was getting increasingly anxious. Although he also had a trump card, this wasn't a suitable time to use it. Elemental Wyrm Xiaohua was Lin Li's ultimate trump card. With its ability to instantaneously cast legendary spells, rarely anyone below sanctuary level could match its abilities. However, if Lin Li was to release Xiaohua now, it would be sending a scrumptious feast to the Whispering God. Unless Xiaohua was full grown and as powerful as the Dragon of Dream. It was no match to the Whispering God. The 7 pieces of the debris of the stars were powerful, but just like Xiao Hua, they would only serve as the Whispering God's mana source. If he had the Stars of Fury, Lin Li believed that even the most ordinary arrow could kill off this Whispering God that was at the peak of legendary realm. Unfortunately, he didn't have it now. When he thought about the Whispering God's abilities, Lin Li was rather puzzled. It seemed that the Whispering God was already at the peak of legendary level when it first came out. Now that it had devoured so much mana, why was its power still at the peak of legendary level? Lin Li remembered clearly that the Whispering God he had witnessed back in the Endless World was totally worthy of its name. That Whispering God got more powerful as it devoured mana during the attack on the City of Stars. When the City of Stars was destroyed, the Whispering God was already in sanctuary level. If not for the fact that the strongest NPC in the Endless World, the half-divine Paladin Francis, came to the rescue, no one knew how much destruction the Whispering God would have brought to the Endless World. On the other hand, this Whispering God was already at the peak of legendary level at first. After devouring so much mana from the archmages and legendary mages of the 4 factions, it should have reached sanctuary level even if it was just level 20 in the beginning. However, this Whispering God didn't even seem to be close to sanctuary level judging from its magic waves. This was definitely abnormal. That was probably the only good news that Lin Li had so far. However, this didn't mean they could finish off this Whispering God easily. At legendary level, Lin Li still couldn't think of any way to deal with it. At this rate, the entire exploration team would be wiped out. Holding the Helios scepter, Lin Li condensed the light and darkness sword again, and he swung the sword towards the Whispering God. However, Lin Li was clear about the result of this blow. Nothing different from the previous ones. Although everyone knew that their attacks were futile, nobody stopped attacking. After all, constant attacks gave the team the slightest hope. If they stopped, it would be no different from waiting to die. Everyone could sense that the exploration team was gradually sliding into the abyss, as more and more legendary mages got out of the fight because they couldn't withstand the drain of magic anymore. The ones who were still defending the team got busier. All they could do was to change their offensive spells continuously, change their magical attributes, and change the angle of attack. It was the same for Lin Li. From releasing all kinds of magic at the start to giving his all in condensing the light and darkness sword now. This was the strongest attack he could use based on his current abilities. Even a legendary Wyrm wouldn't be able to withstand a blow from the light and darkness sword. But the Whispering God was evidently much stronger than a Wyrm. The whispers that the Whispering God released were like a special magical domain. Any magic in this domain couldn't avoid the dispersion of its mana. When the light and darkness sword landed on the Whispering God, it was already very remarkable that 1/10 of its power was released. The legendary magical spells cast by other mages weren't even able to reach the Whispering God's body before disappearing into thin air. With Lin Li's current power at the peak of legendary level, even 1/10 of the light and darkness sword's power was much stronger than back when it tore Steven's, or rather, Mephisto's spirit domain apart. However, such power was like punching a football when used against the Whispering God's extremely resilient body. It couldn't cause any real harm. From the Tower of Dusk, only Lin Li and Basil were still battling the Whispering God now. From the Glitter Gold Trade Union, there was only Hoffman and Thomas, while from the Mithril Alliance and Caesar family, there were only Joseph, Elvis, and Claus left in the battle. Other than Lin Li, who still appeared to be full of mana, the others were all in a state of fatigue. Evidently, the constant loss of mana had a significant effect on them. As for the Whispering God, its power didn't seem any different than before. While dealing with Lin Li and his companions' attacks, its countless tentacles also constantly caused casualties among the exploration team behind them. The whispers that filled the entire incubation room didn't stop, controlling more and more people's minds. In order to stop those people who had been controlled by the Whispering God from leaving the protective circle, a spectacle to be beheld appeared in the 4 factions. Those archmages who had high status in the outside world were now tied up firmly with ropes like cattle and sheep waiting to be slaughtered. If they had the chance to wake up, heaven knew what they would think about this. The team was in a dangerous situation now. Although the Whispering God only had one method to attack them head-on, no one dared to underestimate those green tentacles. Everyone struggled under the tentacles' attacks, including Lin Li. Damn it, what is this thing? Why isn't it dead by now? Joseph was almost driven insane. This was totally the most disgusting battle he had ever been through in his whole life, be it in terms of the battle itself or the opponent's appearance. If he had had a choice, he would have chosen to battle a true Sanctuary Realm opponent instead, even if he would still lose. Joseph was unable to keep his composure, but nobody commented on his lack of manners at a time like this. After all, who didn't have the urge to cough out blood given the current situation. Claus had already thrown his silver box away. Although his trump card, the form-mimicking magical bugs, weren't destroyed like the abyssal demon dragon, he knew that it was impossible for him to get them back now. As for the glitter gold trade union, Thomas was also drenched in sweat. He had to deal with those countless tentacles, while manipulating the war god's shadow. The pressure that he had to withstand was even greater than for the others. Thinking about it, it was rather ridiculous that the trump cards that the two factions had thrown out nullified each other. They were lucky that the war god's shadow was able to hold those magical bugs back. If not, the exploration team would meet with demise even sooner. Flick, we are going to be doomed at this rate. Are you helpless in this situation too? Hoffman could only put all his hopes on Lin Li now. After all, Lin Li had ventured into the Sky Castle and explored Osric's mausoleum before. Out of everyone, only Lin Li seemed rather composed. His magical attacks also didn't weaken as the battle continued. However, Lin Li knew that his mana wasn't truly limitless, and he also couldn't withstand the Whispering God's frantic devouring of mana. If he couldn't finish off the Whispering God soon, it was just a matter of time before his mana would be completely devoured. Lin Li still didn't know why the Whispering God hadn't stepped into the sanctuary realm. It was like a bottomless bucket, which wouldn't be full no matter how much water was poured into it. After all, Lin Li knew that although the Whispering God was called a god, it didn't have much intelligence. Just like those low-level creatures, it depended entirely on its instinct to devour mana to strengthen itself. However, where had the massive amount of mana gone to? As someone who had already seen the gates of the sanctuary realm, Lin Li certainly knew that the amount of mana that the Whispering God had devoured over this period of time was sufficient to elevate it to the sanctuary level. If the mana wasn't used to strengthen it, then where did it go? After all, it was impossible that the mana would have leaked out from the Whispering God's body. If not, the exploration team wouldn't be struggling so much. Thus, there was certainly a place where the devoured mana was stored. Thinking about that, Lin Li's eyes focused on the pool the Whispering God was resting in. In the entire incubation room, this pool was the only place that the exploration team hadn't touched. They had been unaware of it at first. Later on, they were stunned by the presence of the Whispering God. It was only now that Lin Li realized the Whispering God had never left the pool. As the circumstances got more dire, Lin Li's thoughts got clearer. He shouldn't care about how the Whispering God from the Endless World got into Anral. Since it was here already, it was certainly related to the owner of this tomb, Prince Berhir. So, why did Prince Berhir place such a monster in his tomb? Thinking about the missing mana, an idea flashed across Lin Li's mind. Could it be that Prince Berhir used the Whispering God as the mana source of this tomb? If so, Prince Berhir might have cultivated this Whispering God himself. Damn it, what master of the arts? What is pursuing the arts as his lifelong goal? This duke was a madman crazier than any high elf. Even Lin Li was shocked by his speculation. Was there anything crazier than cultivating a terrifying monster like the Whispering God to use as the mana source? Even High Lord Osric, who had ventured into the spirit's realm in order to create the perfect body, had only used an ancient flame dragon's magical crystal as mana source for the eternal furnace. Of course, this was just Lin Li's speculation. The truth might not be as crazy as this. However, Lin Li couldn't think of any better explanation for the missing mana. He definitely had to examine this pool more closely. After all, Lin Li didn't know what lay inside this pool. There might be nothing inside. It might hold the key to turn the tides, or it might be fatal. Regardless of what he might find inside, nothing could be worse than their situation now. Seeing that Lin Li didn't reply, Hoffman apologetically said, "Master Flick, I shouldn't have involved you in this." Evidently, he was hopeless in the situation now. Sensing Hoffman's desperation, Lin Li couldn't reveal anything. After all, he wasn't confident whether he could solve this problem. He replied, "Hold on there. There may be a turn for the better. You have a solution." Lin Li's reply was like the life-saving straw for Hoffman. "I need you to hold this monster back for some time. Whether my method works or not, it depends on the accuracy of my speculation." Lin Li hesitated no longer. He retrieved a tube of blue potion from the Ring of Endless Storm and drank everything in one gulp. Lin Li wasn't just talking to Hoffman. Everyone in the incubation room could hear what he said. Whether his words could spark new hope for these people wasn't something he could control. After Lin Li had drunk the tube of potion, he raised the Helios scepter without waiting for Hoffman's reply. Countless solar spheres fluctuating between black and white color condensed all around Lin Li. As he pointed the Helios scepter, the solar spheres shot towards the Whispering God's forest of tentacles, like a wave of shooting stars. Bang, bang. After these solar spheres, which integrated dark and light energy touched the Whispering God's tentacles. The two conflicting energies immediately exploded with much greater intensity than the self-explosion of the angels of light and dark. Although such explosive power wasn't enough to harm the Whispering God's extremely resilient tentacles, it was able to disperse the tentacles and clear a way towards the pool. Only then did Hoffman and his companions realize what Lin Li had meant. This was too shocking for the exploration team. After all, most of the people in this battle had lost much of their combat energy, and only Lin Li was still in his prime condition, withstanding almost half of the combat pressure. Even so, everyone still felt too fatigued. If they lost Lin Li's powerful fighting strength, everyone would soon suffer a breakdown from the Whispering God's attacks. However, Lin Li didn't wait for the team to respond before taking action. He knew that the difficulty of turning the tides increased exponentially with every second he waited. Thus, Lin Li had already activated his power of flight at full blast without waiting for anyone's response. He zoomed through the path that was cleared by the solar spheres. Towards the pool the Whispering God was in like a flash of lightning. Although Lin Li didn't have to worry about swimming abilities with his current legendary level power, he was after all a human, and not a fish. Thus, his movements underwater were still somewhat affected. Heaven knew how many tentacles the Whispering God hid in the pool. If Lin Li wasn't careful, he might be walking right into the trap. Because of this, Lin Li drank a tube of azure blue ocean potion beforehand so that he had the same ease of motion in water as on land. It took Lin Li less than a second to disperse the tentacles to form a path and reach the edge of the pool. Seeing that the tentacles had started to converge once again, Lin Li dived into the pool without any hesitation. There were indeed a lot of tentacles underwater, but Lin Li swam with more agility than a fish after drinking the ocean potion. He followed the Whispering God's body and dived deeper into the pool while avoiding those continuously attacking tentacles. While it seemed simple, every second that Lin Li spent in the pool was accompanied by great danger. He was like an animal that ventured into the piranha's territory, facing the threat of being torn into shreds any moment. However, Lin Li didn't have any other choice. Not only did he have to find a way to get out of this situation, he also needed to do it fast. Without him, the team outside had to keep withstanding an enormous amount of pressure. Just like Lin Li had thought, the pressure on the exploration team increased immensely after Lin Li had dived into the pool. For a moment, they felt as if it was the end of the world. The casualties in the teams of each faction continued to increase, forcing Hoffman and his companions to switch from attack to defense. However, after losing Lin Li as a powerful fighting force, the team's defense was like a bubble that could burst at any moment facing the Whispering God's frantic attacks. Everyone struggled to persevere, but even though they had pushed themselves beyond their limits, they still couldn't do much. Facing the Whispering God's tentacles and whispers, as well as the mana that was continuously drained from their bodies, everyone could only pin the last bit of hope on Lin Li. However, they didn't think that Lin Li could bring about any miracle because it was too difficult for anyone to defeat the Whispering God. Some people even wondered if there was an escape path under the pool, and if that Fulik escaped alone. However, nobody dared to venture near the pool given the tentacles that blocked the way. Even if they were in their prime condition, they wouldn't be confident enough to break through the blocking tentacles, not to mention in this situation now. Meanwhile, Lin Li was also very anxious. He didn't care about what happened to the other factions after he had left, but there were still close to 100 archmages from the Tower of Dusk above. Those people were the foundation of the Tower of Dusk. If he couldn't defeat the Whispering God in time, losing the archmages would be a serious blow to the Tower of Dusk even if he could escape in the end. Lin Li sent out all of his mental strength, searching for any abnormalities in the pool as he dived towards the bottom. Just as he could put his feet on the bottom of the pool, his mental strength feedback signaled that there were some abnormal magical fluctuations at the other end of the pool. Lin Li instantly got more alert. He waved the Helios scepter, releasing magic to disperse the surrounding tentacles. Then, he dashed towards the source of the abnormality like a fired arrow. As he moved closer to the source, Lin Li got more excited. Judging from the intensity of the Whispering God's attacks, it was evident that there was something very important to the Whispering God there. In the blink of an eye, Lin Li avoided all the tentacles and arrived at the location where his mental strength sensed an abnormality. Upon seeing the source of abnormality, Lin Li was stunned. What he saw was cylindrical equipment that seemed to be used for magic transfer. The tubes were linked to the bottom of the pool, where a booth, carved with complex magat stood. A black magical crystal was embedded into the center of the booth. Countless thin threads that looked like spider silk connected the magical crystal to the Whispering God's body. Seeing all these things, Lin Li realized that his speculation was correct. Prince Bahir had indeed used this Whispering God as the source of mana. However, this knowledge alone was insufficient. Lin Li needed to figure out how to defeat the Whispering God above him. If he didn't have to consider the Whispering God, Lin Li would really want to just cut off all those threads and put that black magical crystal brimming with mana into his own pocket. After all, that black magical crystal contained enough mana for the Whispering God to level up from the legendary to sanctuary realm. It wasn't exaggerating to say it was a sanctuary magical crystal. However, Lin Li guessed that the reason why the Whispering God couldn't reach the sanctuary realm was exactly this black magical crystal. Although the Whispering God wouldn't level up to the sanctuary realm immediately if he were to take it away now, there wouldn't be anything holding it back, and things would become even worse by then. Yet if he didn't take away this magical crystal, how could he defeat the Whispering God? An idea suddenly flashed in Lin Li's mind. As a monster that depended solely on instincts, it was impossible to train a Whispering God like any other animal. According to its instincts, it would never give up any of the mana that it had devoured selfishly. As such, Berhir had to have done something to this Whispering God when he was cultivating it. If not, it wouldn't go against its instincts like what it was doing now. For any creature, survival was always the most basic instinct. Evidently, Berhir had put a restriction on the Whispering God that threatened its survival. That was why the Whispering God chose to forsake the mana that could strengthen itself. On the other hand, if Lin Li allowed the Whispering God to level up, would that trigger Berhir's restriction and bring it to destruction? Lin Li was currently about to make a huge gamble like never before. If he was right, he would defeat the Whispering God. If he was wrong, then he would create a sanctuary-level enemy. However, Lin Li didn't have any other options now. If he didn't take this bet, the whole team would still walk towards destruction. Looking at the enticing black magical crystal, Lin Li shook his head with resignation. He held up a piece of debris of the star's thunderbolt and started injecting mana into the Whispering God's body. The mageths on his spastime magic robe lit up with brilliance due to the huge amount of mana being injected. Although it hadn't been long since Lin Li had entered the pool, the exploration team outside was already on the verge of collapse. More and more mages and warriors got controlled by the Whispering God's whispers. The leaders of the four factions, including Hoffman, were struggling to deal with the Whispering God's attacks and couldn't spare any effort to care about their subordinates. Every second felt like eternity to everyone. No one knew how much longer they could persevere. When Lin Li just entered the pool, everyone was still a little hopeful that he could find a way to save them. However, seeing that there wasn't any movement in the pool after so long, their hopes died down with time. Just then, a terrifying wave of mana suddenly erupted from the pool. The team was terrified to realize that this monster's abilities increased continuously, almost reaching sanctuary level in a flash. However, when the fear had only just started to settle in their hearts, the monster radiating sanctuary level mana suddenly bloated like a huge balloon before anyone could react. It continued to bloat up even after its enormous body filled up the entire pool. Every tentacle became as thick as a pillar. After that, the whispers that filled the room stopped. What replaced them was a loud bam. The entire incubation room shook vigorously under the shock as if it was going to collapse at any moment. The immense impact was like a hurricane. Everyone was swept away from the source of the explosion. Even legendary powerhouses like Hoffman and Joseph couldn't withstand such impact, and could only retreat while putting up their defensive magic. After the explosion, the incubation room seemed to have been enveloped by a thick green smog that greatly lowered the visibility of the team. Following that, a horrible stench almost made the team unable to breathe. However, everyone was filled with joy because they could clearly feel that their mana was no longer seeping away from their bodies. The surrounding environment was also brimming with mana, providing a quick respite to their exhausted mana. Undoubtedly, that nasty monster had finally disappeared from this world. How would Falik, who was the closest to the center of the explosion, fare under such a great shock? A tinge of anticipation rose in Joseph's mind. Perhaps this could totally resolve the problem of the Tower of Dusk. Meanwhile, Hoffman was getting anxious. He cast numerous spells to disperse the smog, wanting to know Lin Li's condition as soon as possible. Not to mention their friendship, Lin Li and the Tower of Dusk were very important to the development of the Glittergold Trade Union. Hoffman certainly didn't want to lose such an ally. Finally, when the smog had thinned, Hoffman vaguely saw a silhouette not far from the edge of the pool. He immediately hastened the speed of casting the spells, and tentatively shouted, "Master Falik, is that you? How are you now? Are you alright?" Just then, a blinding flash of white light rose from that silhouette, and radiated across the entire incubation room. Under the bright light, the green smog which filled the room disappeared like ice under the effect of sunlight. President Falik, Master Falik, Basel, Norfaler, Ufalusi, and Hoffman finally saw who that silhouette was, and rushed towards him excitedly. surrounding Lin Li in the middle. While they were thrilled that Lin Li was alive, they were also worried whether Lin Li had suffered any injuries. After all, there was still Joseph from the Mithril Alliance, watching over him like a hawk. Lin Li looked at the surroundings. Although the green smog had been purified by the holy light, the already abandoned incubation room looked even shabbier after the explosion. Everything around the center of the pool had been destroyed. The incubation equipment that the team had been damaged beyond salvaging. Seeing the concern everyone had shown around him, Lin Li put up a comforting smile and said, "I was lucky to avoid the explosion just in time, so I'm not hurt at all. Since that monster is killed now, let's hurry up and treat the injured now. I hope that you didn't suffer much loss when I wasn't around." Recalling the explosion, Lin Li was secretly thankful that he had worn the spacetime magic robe that Nifa had given him, which allowed him to escape from the bottom of the pool just in time. If not, he would have been seriously wounded if not dead even, with his power at the peak of legendary realm. However, the team outside of the pool wasn't so lucky, especially those who had been controlled after the Whispering God devoured all of their mana. Although they regained consciousness after the whispers stopped, they were almost defenseless when facing the explosion without their mana. Even a lot of people from the Tower of Dusk suffered injuries too, despite the fact that they got a little bit of protection from the top-level magical equipment that they had donned. As for the mages from the other three factions, they weren't as lucky. Now that the Whispering God was killed, the pressing issue was curing the injured mages. Looking at the injured, the leaders of the factions couldn't help but feel troubled. This troubled feeling even washed away some of the happiness they had felt after escaping death narrowly. "Master Flick, it looks like we have to spend a while here. It's not so bad on your side, but for us." Hoffman shook his head with a frown. Clearly, the situation didn't look great. Due to the explosion of the Whispering God, a great amount of mana had been released. Thus, the mages who had exhausted all their mana could recover to their original state after a short period of meditation. 1. It's not really clear whether it's a booth because of the vague wording, so it may change to a seat or something of the sort. However, the impact of the explosion left many seriously injured. Some had broken their legs, and some suffered a hemorrhage, while others were accidentally injured by their comrades during the battle. There were even some who had broken their necks and were currently paralyzed. Although the situation for the Tower of Dusk was better, that didn't mean there weren't any injuries. The other three factions fared worse. Even in this magical world with all kinds of amazing potions, such injuries still could not be easily cured. Some of these people might have to end their exploration here. Looking at these seriously injured men, the leaders of the other three factions all looked glum. Only Lin Li didn't seem to be worried at all. Instead, he turned and asked Hoffman, "Master Hoffman, what potions are you using?" Hoffman paused for a second. He couldn't quite understand what Lin Li was implying. However, he still answered, "We've specially prepared superfine healing potions made by the Tower of Dusk for this exploration. However, the injured probably cannot recover fast even with these potions." Healing potions weren't omnipotent. Although they could help to stop bleeding and speed up the recovery process, serious injuries such as bone damage and hemorrhage required a few days to fully recover, as the patient needed a period of time to regain their vitality. Thus, Hoffman said that it was difficult for Lin Li's subordinates to heal in a short time. They could either send them all back or wait here for a period of time for them to heal. "Haha, don't be worried, Master Hoffman. We've brought this time some life potions, which are more effective than healing potions as well. Use them on the injured," Lin Li commented as he took out a box directly from the Ring of Endless Storm. "What? Life potion?" As he was a pharmaceutics master himself, Hoffman's eyes lit up upon hearing Lin Li mention life potion. After all, the life potion was a master-level potion, and totally not on the same level as the healing potion. Healing potions could heal a patient by using his vitality. Thus, the patient still needed a period of time to regain his vitality even after he had healed his wounds. However, life potions would directly recover the patient's vitality. Although they couldn't allow the patient to fully recover immediately after drinking the potion, the patient could regain his ability to fight very fast. However, the life potion also cost much more than the healing potion. It was possible that the price of 100 healing potions wasn't enough to buy even one life potion. As a true pharmaceutics master, Hoffman could concoct a life potion himself. However, it was impossible to produce them on a big scale. One of the reasons was the rarity of the ingredients used, while the other was that he couldn't guarantee the success rate. Without his current pharmaceutic standards, it was difficult to even ensure a success rate of 50%. On the other hand, each failure in concoction meant the wastage of a large sum of money. Thus, in the Glitter Gold Trade Union, only leaders such as Hoffman kept 1 or 2 tubes of life potions in case of emergency. Now, Lin Li took out a box of life potions just like that. If not for Hoffman's understanding of Lin Li, he would have thought he was kidding. However, even though he knew Lin Li wouldn't lie to him, Hoffman still couldn't help but gasp when he saw the rows of light green potions arranged neatly in the box, radiating a strong aura of life. This, Hoffman was a little embarrassed to receive such a valuable gift. After all, he had asked Lin Li to collaborate in this exploration. He wouldn't be so embarrassed if they had made plenty of gains from it. However, the truth was that they were still empty-handed now. How would he dare accept such precious potions? Master Hoffman, this doesn't seem like you. I still have plenty of life potions, so just take them. Don't we still have to continue exploring the relics? It'll be advantageous to the exploration later if your men can recover fast. Ha ha, then I will gladly take it. Hoffman didn't really want Lin Li to take back the potions. He ordered his men to take those life potions to heal the injured. Almost all the injured men from Glitter Gold Trade Union and the Tower of Dusk were healed by the life potions. Such powerful potions were sufficient for them to regain their strength and power in a very short time. However, things were different for the Mithril Alliance and Caesar family. They used the superfine healing potions produced by the Tower of Dusk. This was already the best healing potion they could find on the market, but how could that match the life potion? It was already very good if it could help to recover a person to half of his usual fighting power. Joseph was already extremely unhappy over the fact that Lin Li managed to come out of the explosion alive. Now that he saw those two factions use life potions to heal the injured so lavishly, his face turned even more glum. However, the Mithril Alliance and the Tower of Dusk had been enemies for a very long time. It was already a feat for the two to collaborate in this exploration. Thus, asking the Tower of Dusk to supply some life potions to them was totally impossible. Joseph secretly made up his mind that he wouldn't let go of any chance to deal with the Tower of Dusk in the following part of the exploration. As long as he could trap the Tower of Dusk's team in this mausoleum, he had ways to turn everything the Tower of Dusk currently had, its lands, businesses, and talents, into the Mithril Alliances. As for whether he had the chance to achieve this, that was a question for later. Now, Joseph was having a headache over how to recover his subordinates' fighting strength. Joseph wasn't the only one who was jealous of the Tower of Dusk and Glitter Gold Trade Union's lavishness. Claus from the Caesar family also watched those injured men from the two factions take each precious life potion with jealousy. Looking at his own team, everyone was in a state of feebleness. Claus hesitated for a moment before clenching his teeth and walking towards the Tower of Dusk's side. President Flick, we managed to escape death narrowly thanks to you, said Claus awkwardly. This wasn't just polite words. Everyone present knew that the explosion of that monster had to do with Lin Li entering the pool. You're too polite, Patriarch Claus. We're all collaborating partners. If I hadn't done that, my own men would have been dead too. Although the Caesar family had always sided with the Mithril Alliance, Lin Li didn't show a cold face to Claus. Seeing that Lin Li didn't humiliate him, Claus calmed down a little. With a troubled expression, he continued, President Flick, you see, the Caesar family's side also has many people who are severely injured. It'll be very hard for them to recover their power with the healing potions alone. May I know if there are any spare life potions on your side? I'm willing to buy some at market price. No, higher than market price. What are you talking about, Patriarch Claus? Aren't we partners? Just take these 20 potions. Lin Li took out a small box and handed it over to Claus directly. Claus was surprised by Lin Li's generosity. He was prepared to pay a large sum for those potions should Lin Li choose to overcharge him. Little did he know, Lin Li didn't even mention anything about money. He accepted the box and sincerely replied, You're too kind. How can we take these precious potions for free? Don't decline anymore, Patriarch Claus. Lin Li didn't look reluctant at all to give out 20 life potions just like that. It was as if he had just given out some useless things. As the patriarch of a clan, it wasn't suitable for Claus to say any exaggerated words of gratitude to Lin Li, even though he had asked for the potions shamelessly. After expressing his gratitude appropriately, he carried the potion box back to his team and started using the life potions to treat the injured. After Claus left, Hoffman glanced at the Caesar family's team and asked Lin Li, Master Flick, did you just give out 20 life potions for free? For free? Not exactly. I've always loved to make others feel uncomfortable. Lin Li laughed and said no more. However, Hoffman was an intelligent man. He immediately turned towards the Mithril Alliance's side. Seeing Joseph's increasingly glum face, Hoffman let out a sly smile. The Caesar family was the Mithril Alliance's firm ally. Now that the Caesar family managed to get help from the Tower of Dusk, it was clear how Joseph would feel about that. Just as Hoffman thought, it was impossible for Joseph not to feel anything upon seeing Claus come back with a box of potions from Lin Li. He was very clear that with the Mithril Alliance alone, it would be difficult to deal with the Tower of Dusk, not mentioning the alliance between the Tower of Dusk and Glitter Gold Trade Union. What was keeping this exploration team in balance was the fact that the Mithril Alliance had allied with the Caesar family. However, now that the Caesar family had gotten help from the Tower of Dusk, would they still commit to dealing with the Tower of Dusk in the future? Joseph also knew that the Caesar family wouldn't be easily bought over by a few potions. However, whether the Caesar family would give its all to fight the Tower of Dusk, should the two alliances turn on each other, was a question. With the Tower of Dusk's life potions, the severely injured men from the Caesar family quickly received the best treatment. With just a little bit of rest, they could recover about 80% of their fighting prowess. This scene made those from the Mithril Alliance extremely envious. However, Joseph would never bow down to seek help from the Tower of Dusk. He would only be humiliated even if he did that. After each faction settled the problem of the injured men, the leaders of each faction led those who had recovered as well as those who hadn't been injured to continue searching the incubation room. After all, their real objective here wasn't to fight, but to make some gains from this relic site. Thus, searching for valuable things was the prime goal here. However, the chance of finding anything valuable in the already deserted incubation room after the explosion was even lower. The gear that the team had eyed were almost completely destroyed in the explosion. Even the time domain which Claus had booked, the core of this incubation room, was destroyed. Even if they could find any valuable things, it could only be the spare parts. Lin Li hadn't been too concerned with this incubation room at first. After all, he didn't even want the time domain, not to mention these parts that had already lost their function. However, the appearance of the Whispering God made Lin Li judge the value of this incubation again, especially since this Whispering God was very likely to have been created by Prince Brahir himself. Unfortunately, the entire incubation room was turned into ruins now. Digging a rubbish dump would probably yield more valuables than this place now. Seeing that each faction's team had spread out to search the place inch by inch, Lin Li suddenly thought of the equipment which had held the black magical crystal back when he dived into the pool. He didn't know if there was anything left of it after the explosion. However, just as Lin Li prepared to take a look at the pool, he heard joyful calls from the Mithril Alliance's team. Lin Li turned and saw a green spherical object with holes on it lying in Joseph's hands. Feeble murmurs came out from those holes. Lin Li frowned a little and relaxed his brows instantly. Back at the Endless World, after Paladin Francis had killed that Whispering God, someone had picked up the same thing was what Joseph was holding now. The system named it the Whispering God's heart. Be it its heart or brain, this green sphere was the Whispering God's essential organ. Those mind-controlling whispers were produced by this essential organ. Thus, the Whispering God's special ability was also known as Heart Whisper. Joseph didn't know the Whispering God, so he wouldn't know anything about the Whispering God's heart. However, just from the whispers alone, he could guess that the source of the monster's mind-controlling abilities was this thing. This really was a treasure. Recalling the scene during the battle against the monster, Joseph looked at this sphere in his hands, and all the gloominess in his heart was immediately swept away. Under the current magic system, mental spells like Allure could affect people's mind, but magic that could control a large number of people, like the Whispering God's whispers, was unheard of. Although the scope of the mind-controlling whispers only extended to this incubation room and the battle just now, Joseph could totally visualize how the effect of the whispers could extend even further if it was used in a more spacious room. That would make it an invincible weapon. As long as he could find the right way to use it, it would become the most formidable weapon the Mithril Alliance possessed. He could even analyze the principles behind how the whispers were produced and create a new forbidden spell. As the one who had this magic, he would be a man of high status in the whole of Anril. Thinking of how much benefits this Whispering God's heart could potentially bring for him, Joseph couldn't hide the excitement he was feeling now. Seeing that Joseph was holding the Whispering God's heart with inconcealable joy, Lin Li didn't feel any sense of jealousy at all. Instead, he shook his head with a smile. Lin Li could guess what Joseph was plotting from his facial expression. However, how could the secrets behind the Whispering God's heart be so easily deciphered? Back at the Endless World, the Whispering God's heart, which was left behind, also stirred up a storm amongst players in the game as if an artifact had appeared. Everyone had the same thought as Joseph. They wanted to either use it to create a powerful magical weapon or analyze the powerful heart-whispering magic behind it. What was the outcome? Lin Li still remembered that the last owner of that Whispering God's heart had been rumored to have put an immense effort to invite numerous NPCs from different fields who had reached the peak of guru level, hoping to crack the secrets of the Whispering God's heart. However, those NPCs didn't even do any research on the Whispering God's heart after they had seen it, and told its owner that it wasn't a realm mortals could reach. Rather than consulting them, he might have a better chance if he took it to the gods and prayed. In the end, the owner of that Whispering God's heart didn't pray to the gods. Instead, He sold it to the system store out of anger. The most ridiculous thing was that the system only gave him 1 gold coin for it. In the setting of the endless world, there weren't any wars that destroyed a great amount of inheritance like in Anral. Thus, the amount of knowledge in all fields was significantly higher in the endless world compared to Anral. If not, Lin Li wouldn't have had such a good life in Anral with his knowledge from the endless world. Not to mention gurus who were a step away from becoming divine smiths. Even a normal guru was extremely rare to find in the current Anral. People who had reached master level were already at the peak of each field. In an environment with this level of knowledge, it was a fool's dream to obtain anything from analyzing the Whispering God's heart. It wasn't exaggerating to say that even High Lord Osric from the Dark Age might not be able to grasp the skill to create these mind-controlling whispers. As for Prince Berhir, who had personally created this Whispering God, he was undeniably a genius and a true madman. Lin Li knew that he possibly wasn't as talented as Prince Berhir, so he was naturally not interested in the Whispering God's heart Joseph was holding. However, the others in the team didn't know as much as Lin Li. Be it Hoffman or Claus, both looked rather jealous of Joseph's good luck, and ordered their men to search the room more carefully. Even a piece of garbage had to be properly examined. "President, look at this." Just as Lin Li was walking towards the pool, Alan came close to him mysteriously, and carefully took out an item away from the Mithril Alliance in Caesar family's view. After seeing what Alan had taken out, Lin Li couldn't help but laugh. It was Claw's precious trump card, the form-mimicking magical bug's hive. He asked Alan, "How did it end up with you?" It hadn't been long since Alan reached the legendary realm, so he was the first legendary mage to exit the battle. If not for the top-grade magical equipment he had carried, he would have fallen out of the legendary realm under the Whispering God's devouring of mana. After exiting the battle, Alan stayed with the Tower of Dusk's team together with those archmages who had lost their ability to fight. He didn't return to the battlefield anymore other than providing some aid to his surrounding comrades in times of dire crisis. Hence, Lin Li was curious how Claw's hive had landed in Alan's hands. Upon hearing Lin Li's inquiry, Alan blushed a little, and replied, "All of us were thrown back by those shock waves during the explosion. I was busy casting defense spells for others, but this thing hit my head, so I just kept it." "Oh, since this originally belonged to the Caesar family, just return it to them," replied Lin Li with an unbothered tone. Alan was rather surprised by Lin Li's words. After all, it didn't seem like the president's style to return a benefit that he had obtained. Although those magical bugs didn't help with anything in that battle, they still possessed level 24 power. If not for the fact that he was very familiar with Lin Li's mana waves, Alan would have thought that the president Flick in front of him had been replaced by another person back in the pool. However, Alan never doubted Lin Li's words. He took the hive and walked towards the Caesar family's team. Originally, the Caesar family was closer to the Mithril Alliance, so they didn't have any particularly good feelings about the Tower of Dusk. However, little did the Caesar family's team know that the Tower of Dusk would provide them with life potions for free. Their attitude towards the Tower of Dusk had changed slightly as a result. Without anyone blocking the way, Alan soon stood next to Claus. Who knew what the two had spoken about, but both made their way towards Lin Li's side afterward. The magical bug's hive was still with Alan. After Claus walked closer to Lin Li, he said with some embarrassment, "President Flick, I've heard that you have much expertise on mages. This hive is useless in my hands now. Please accept my humble gift." Originally, Claus would be able to control those magical bugs again after the Whispering God had been destroyed. Unfortunately, more than half of the mageths and magical arrays on the hive had been destroyed during the time the Whispering God had taken control over the bugs. Although the Whispering God lost its control over the bugs after the explosion, and the bugs returned to their hive, Claus had lost the ability to control them again. Moreover, this hive was an item from the High Elves era. Although it wasn't anything important then, the mageths and magical arrays weren't easy to repair given the current level of skills in Anral. Thus, Claus was clear that this thing was basically useless now. Since the Tower of Dusk's men had found it, he might as well do a favor to the Tower of Dusk. After all, the Tower of Dusk probably didn't have the ability to repair it now. Hence, it wouldn't affect the balance of power amongst the factions in the exploration team. What Claus didn't know was that no faction in Anral could match the Tower of Dusk in terms of expertise in inscription and alchemy. Although the people here perceived this hive to be a powerful magical tool, it was but a toy during the High Elves era. Thus, it wasn't difficult at all for Lin Li to repair this. Since Claus had said that he didn't want it, Lin Li naturally wouldn't decline the offer. After all, it possessed level 24 power. As long as they didn't meet an insanely powerful monster like the Whispering God, the hive would be useful. Joseph saw that Claus and Lin Li had once again engaged in a conversation. However, his emotions weren't very affected by it, This time, since he was still immersed in the joy that the Whispering God's heart had brought, his brain was full of images on how the Mithril Alliance, or rather his family, could become the most powerful faction in the breezy plains after he had figured out the secrets behind the mind-controlling whispers. After Lin Li had put the hive into his ring of endless storm, some men from the Caesar family had come looking for Claus, telling him that they had found some valuable mana-transferring tubes. Claus' spirits went up upon hearing this news. He immediately turned to say goodbye to Lin Li and brought his men back to the Caesar family's team. Up till now, the Caesar family had not only gained nothing from the exploration, but also suffered a great loss. The time domain that they wanted was destroyed in the explosion, while their trump card, the form-mimicking magical bugs, was gifted to the Tower of Dusk. As the hive had suffered damage, the Mithril Alliance had obtained the Whispering God's heart, while the Tower of Dusk and Glitter Gold Trade Union didn't suffer any loss, though they hadn't made any gains, either. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for Claus not to feel anxious. The mana-transferring tube wasn't exactly a tube that people normally knew. It was actually alchemy equipment that could increase the efficiency of mana transfer. Although its name might sound rather ordinary, anyone who had the slight knowledge of inscription or alchemy would know the importance of mana-transferring tubes. Moreover, this was the Prince Berhir's incubation room. Even the smallest gear wouldn't be ordinary, not mentioning crucial equipment like the mana-transferring tube. Normally, the crystal inscription pen was used to inscribe mageths together with special magical ink. The mageths were inscribed at the place desired straight away, and were connected to the mana source directly. However, that only applied to mageths which didn't require a lot of mana to function. The really powerful mageth arrays would waste a shocking 90% of mana, should they be inscribed in this manner. Thus, the mana-transferring tube became of crucial importance in a large-scale mageth array like this time domain. After constant boost from the mana-transferring tube, the wastage of mana, when the mana flew through the magic pathways, would be greatly reduced. Other than increasing mana usage rate, the pressure on the mana source would also be greatly reduced as a result. This also helped to increase the lifespan of the mana source immensely. In addition, the magic pathways would be corroded by mana itself during mana transfer. This was another factor that affected the lifespan of the entire mageth array. After all, no matter how strong the mana source was, even if it could apply 10,000 years worth of mana, the whole mageth array would lose its effect if the magic pathways were broken. After mana had been strengthened by the mana-transferring tube, however, the corrosion of the magic pathways would naturally decrease alongside the decreasing wastage of mana. A simple example here would be a legendary magical crystal, which acted as the source of mana in a mageth array. If they did not use the mana-transferring tube before the mana entered the circuit, the lifespan of both the source of mana and the mana-transferring tube would only be able to reach 100 years. If one were to add the mana-transferring tube to the source of mana, he would be able to slow down the usage of the source of mana and lengthen the lifespan of both the source of mana and the mana-transferring tube. The mageth array might be able to sustain activity for more than 1,000 years. Furthermore, as the use of mana became more efficient, the mageth array would be able to exert greater powers. Hence, the mana-transferring tube was extremely important to a mageth array, especially if it was one of a large scale. An example would be the all-kill array from the Tower of Dusk. Although those wards of bad luck were inscribed by Moke, Lin Li had used mana-transferring tubes to allow the source of mana to transfer its mana outwards. If not, the all-kill array would definitely not have been able to exert half of its current capability. The rate of its energy usage would decrease by more than half as well. The mana-transferring tube that the Caesar family had found was not only an important tool for the mageth arrays, the fact that it was embedded with the High Elves' technologies also gave it a great significance. Even if the Caesar family was unable to perfectly replicate the mana-transferring tube despite their network and tremendous research, it would certainly be a great reward if they were able to create one that had a little resemblance, in effect, to the original transferring tube. In fact, although the mana-transferring tube the Caesar family had found was not very attractive, it was more valuable as compared to the heart of the Whispering God in Joseph's hands. However, Lin Li might be the only person who thought this. There was an inconcealable excitement on Joseph's face, and the rest of them all seemed extremely jealous of his findings. The Tower of Dusk and Glitter Gold Trade Union were searching through the ruins very thoroughly as well. Elvin, the master of inscription from the Glitter Gold Trade Union, as well as Angelano, the alchemy guru from the Tower of Dusk, also found some loose yet valuable items. Seeing that the different forces were expanding their area of search, Lin Li also decided that he should not waste any more time. He leapt into the water again, More than half of the water from the lake was spilled out due to the earlier explosion. It was fortunate that the lake was deep to start with, so nothing was brought out with the water. This helped to prevent other forces from vying for treasures with Lin Li. Of course, it might mean that there was nothing within the water as well. After all, the explosion was so violent that it forced Lin Li to stay away from the center of explosion. Joseph, who had just put away the heart of the Whispering God, smirked after watching Lin Li leap into the water. He was certain that the spell that caused the explosion had to be at the peak of the legendary level. Now that the incubation room had turned into ruins, how would there be any valuable items left in it? Any treasure would have turned into ashes. This was what Lin Li was thinking about as well. He only jumped into the water with a glimpse of hope. After he entered the water, he swam along the familiar path towards the black crystal. However, when he reached the area, he had the shock of his life. Lin Li originally planned to see if there were any loose parts left behind. After all, this was a place used to imprison the Whispering God. It had to be the most important place within the incubation room. Yet, what shocked him was that although the mana transferring pillar had collapsed, the pedestal, the black magical crystal, was etched and was lying very quietly at the bottom of the lake. It seemed like it had not been really damaged. This was definitely not what Lin Li had expected. He wouldn't be so shocked if it was another thing that survived the impact of the explosion, but this pedestal was located in the epicenter of the explosion. If it could still maintain its original shape, the pedestal had to be something else. Lin Li took extra precaution when he went over to pick up that item. He was prepared that it might be an illusion that would disappear with human touch. It wasn't until he felt the concrete object that he sighed in relief and proceeded to scrutinize the item from up close. Yet, Lin Li's knowledge and experience were not sufficient to help him understand the origin of the item immediately. Hence, he could only bring it out of the lake. He was putting his hopes on Conorus, the ancient deity who had been living for a long time, and Angelano, the goblin who was at the peak of the guru level in the domain of alchemy. He thought that their experience could help identify this item. Lin Li leapt out of the water with the item in his hands, and that attracted the attention of many. Although these people did not recognize what was in his hands, they were aware that it had to be something that survived the explosion. Hence, it had to be something extraordinary. Joseph could not help but sulk at Lin Li's findings. Why hadn't he thought of heading into the lake when it was where that monster had emerged from? But all was too late. Joseph was skeptical that there would be anything valuable left inside the lake that had been searched by Lin Li. After returning to his team, Lin Li immediately summoned Conorus and Angelano. He showed them the item in his hands and asked, "What do you think about this?" Before Lin Li finished his question, Angelano slammed the seated alchemy machine. Its two mechanical arms reached over to Lin Li to snatch the item for a closer scrutiny. "This is a miracle. This has to be a miracle in the whole history of alchemy. It is perfect. Am I dreaming?" he gasped in amazement repeatedly. Although Lin Li knew that the item was not simple, he did not expect such an extreme reaction from Angelano. He turned to look at Conorus, and saw that Conorus did not share the same excitement as Angelano. It seemed like he did not recognize that item. "Angelano, do you recognize this thing?" inquired Lin Li impatiently, when he saw Angelano's excitement. "What? How could you say that this is a thing? This is the mightiest creation in the history of alchemy. I cannot believe that I can witness its existence. This is unbelievable." Angelano danced on the machine with glee. He was immersed in his excitement. "All right, then it will be a miracle, whatever you call it. Now, can you tell me what miracle it is in your hands?" Lin Li replied impatiently. He really had an urge to drag Angelano down from his machine for an interrogation. "This is the Heart of Stars. Just look at its perfect structure. I really cannot imagine anyone else who has such a marvelous capability in alchemy other than gods," Angelano cried as he tried to calm himself down. Angelano's words took Lin Li's composure away. While he did not recognize the treasure, it did not mean that he did not know about it. His rich experience in alchemy had given him the knowledge of the ultimate legend of the Heart of Stars in the domain of alchemy. It was said that alchemists, who had the ability to create the Heart of Stars, would have reached the level of the divine smith. What they lacked would only be that one opportunity. Lin Li could see that the Heart of Stars he had acquired was made of the perfect ratio of many rare metals. The strengths of these metals were extracted and combined into a type of superb magical metal. The metal was the reason why Heart of Stars was left untouched by the violent explosion. Any other magical metal would not have survived destruction. The technology that created the Heart of Stars was like a distant dream to Lin Li. He was sure that he would not be able to find anything more powerful than that in Anril or the Endless World. In his memory, only the lost Stars of Fury could be a match for the Heart of Stars. Of course, this did not mean that the Heart of Stars was very powerful. Although it was made with extremely rare metals and was processed using high-end alchemical technology, it was, after all, not a magical weapon. It had a totally different function compared to the Stars of Fury. "But I cannot understand why Brahir used the Heart of Stars here," said Angelano doubtfully. He finally could engage in logical thinking after all that excitement. According to his knowledge, a creation as magnificent as the Heart of Stars had to be used in the rarest source of mana. It would be a great waste to use it in an ordinary one. He has a point here. Why did Brahir use the Heart of Stars here? Lin Li contemplated. He was extremely clear about where the powers of the Heart of Stars could be best used. Hence, like Angelano, he could not comprehend Brahir's intention. The Heart of Stars was supposed to refine mana. Although the Heart of Stars was used as the source of mana here, it was a medium that emitted mana of a single property. A direct mana source or alchemy or A alone would have been able to help to refine the mana. Wouldn't it be an exaggeration to use the Heart of Stars here? Unless the mana supplied by the Whispering God was not something it processed from the structure. But, Angelano, do you recognize this thing? Inquired Lin Li impatiently, when he saw Angelano's excitement. What? How could you say that this is a thing? This is the mightiest creation in the history of alchemy. I cannot believe that I can witness its existence. This is unbelievable. Angelano danced on the machine with glee. He was immersed in his excitement. All right, then it will be a miracle, whatever you call it. Now, can you tell me what miracle it is in your hands? Lin Li replied impatiently. He really had an urge to drag Angelano down from his machine for an interrogation. This is the Heart of Stars. Just look at its perfect structure. I really cannot imagine anyone else who has such a marvelous capability in alchemy other than gods. Angelano cried as he tried to calm himself down. Angelano's words took Lin Li's composure away. While he did not recognize the treasure, it did not mean that he did not know about it. His rich experience in alchemy had given him the knowledge of the ultimate legend of the Heart of Stars in the domain of alchemy. It was said that alchemists, who had the ability to create the Heart of Stars, would have reached the level of the divine smith. What they lacked would only be that one opportunity. Lin Li could see that the Heart of Stars he had acquired was made of the perfect ratio of many rare metals. The strengths of these metals were extracted and combined into a type of superb magical metal. The metal was the reason why Heart of Stars was left untouched by the violent explosion. Any other magical metal would not have survived destruction. The technology that created the Heart of Stars was like a distant dream to Lin Li. He was sure that he would not be able to find anything more powerful than that in Anril or the Endless World. In his memory, only the lost stars of fury could be a match for the Heart of Stars. Of course, this did not mean that the Heart of Stars was very powerful. Although it was made with extremely rare metals and was processed using high-end alchemical technology, it was, after all, not a magical weapon. It had a totally different function compared to the Stars of Fury. But, I cannot understand why Brahir used the Heart of Stars here, said Angelano doubtfully. He finally could engage in logical thinking after all that excitement. According to his knowledge, a creation as magnificent as the Heart of Stars had to be used in the rarest source of mana. It would be a great waste to use it in an ordinary one. He has a point here. Why did Brahir use the Heart of Stars here? Lin Li contemplated. He was extremely clear about where the powers of the Heart of Stars could be best used. Hence, like Angelano, he could not comprehend Brahir's intention. The Heart of Stars was supposed to refine mana. Although the Heart of Stars was used as the source of mana here, it was a medium that emitted mana of a single property. A direct mana source or alchemy or A alone would have been able to help to refine the mana. Wouldn't it be an exaggeration to use the Heart of Stars here? Unless the mana supplied by the Whispering God was not something it processed from the structure. But, the thought made Lin Li shiver. Could that black magical crystal be the real magical crystal of the Whispering God, instead of the medium that only stored the mana that it devoured? Lin Li was wondering why the Whispering God could not reach the sanctuary realm, despite all the mana it had been absorbing. The process of draining mana was akin to how the ingestion of food would create additional nutrients that would be beneficial to one's growth. The food consumed by the Whispering God was all the different types of mana, but if it wanted to achieve growth, it would need to convert all that mana into its own. If the Whispering God could only absorb all sorts of mana, but did not have the chance to process it, it would be like a person who suffered from indigestion, which would limit growth and development. That being said, what could have happened to inhibit the opportunity for the Whispering God to process that mana? A possibility would be to snatch the mana from the Whispering God before it could convert it into its own. Hence, there was a high possibility for the black magical crystal to belong to the Whispering God, except that it was shifted out of its body by Brahir. If this was really the case, there would be nothing unusual for the Heart of Stars to be employed here. The mana drained by the Whispering God came from different sources. It was like a mana galore, which made it impossible to employ as a direct source of mana. No maggeths or arrays had the power to use such a disorderly system of mana. If one were to use it forcefully, there would be only one result, an immediate collapse. This was not only a problem of a set of disorderly mana, it was also a concern that the mageths and arrays would require mana with differing magical attributes. Hence, if it was a mana source with a single attribute, it would not be able to fulfill the needs of all the mageths and arrays. As a result, they might not function as normal, and it could even affect the lifespan of the mageths and arrays. Hence, the usage of the Heart of Stars was of utmost importance. It had the ability to refine the impure mixture of mana into the purest form, and transfer it to every magical facility that required mana. This would prevent the conflict that would arise due to clashing magical attributes of mana. However, having a magical crystal that was outside the body was an incredibly absurd idea. The mere thought of it unsettled Lin Li. He could accept the fact that Berhir was trying to nurture the Whispering God in the incubation room, but he just could not agree with Berhir in how he used the Whispering God as the mana source, and shifted his magical crystal out of his body. To Lin Li, Berhir was indeed a talented maniac. No, the Heart of Stars is in fact used appropriately here, spoke Lin Li. He briefly told them about the Whispering God. Of course, he would not reveal anything about the endless world. He only told them about how the Whispering God absorbed mana and was turned into the source of mana by Berhir. This Berhir is even more freaky than Osric. How could he nurture this monster as the source of mana? Both Angelano and Conoris were aware of Osric's personality. They could not imagine that there would be anyone more crazy than Osric.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.